Hi guys, I hope you're feeling good today, and welcome to Creative Cuts, a channel where I build, paint and create things. Now I love aliens, UFOs, and the big existential questions of, are we alone in the universe? So it was only a matter of time before I built a UFO themed diorama. There are many approaches that I could have taken for this, but part of me wanted to present the aliens as a friendly species making contact with humans for the first time. Let me know in the comments below if you think aliens would be friendly. So, to begin, I would need a base to work on. I had a scrap piece of wood and glued a sheet of XPS foam onto it. This would provide me with a solid base, as well as give me something that I could work into and terraform the ground a little. A big part of diorama building is choosing how much information to include to create a scenario. You are limited by the space and scale you work on. You can't include everything. Some editing will have to take place, so it pays to think about what information is needed to communicate your idea. I wanted to create a farm scene for my alien contact to take place, but I quickly realised common ideas like crop circles, etc. would be very difficult to express on this scale without making something that was absolutely massive. So I started to think about what elements could describe a farm in a very limited way. I came up with the idea of a fence between fields with a gate big enough to fit a tractor, and also the edge of a field where some crops have been sown. To begin to get some more natural looking ground, I knew that I would have to change the levels of the perfectly flat foam a little. A wire brush is a great way to add some texture, as it quickly scuffs the foam and allows me to carve out a channel of sorts. For terraforming and getting some natural undulation to my scene, I added some slight depressions with a heat gun. A light touch allows you to control how much foam is melted. Next, I mixed up some PVA with some dried earth to make some ground cover. I dried this earth out fully in the oven to kill any lingering bacteria that might be hiding within. I kept this PVA mix pretty wet, so it would self-level a little bit, and because I used a healthy amount of PVA, I was able to sprinkle more dry dirt over the top. This meant that some parts absorbed more liquid than others and created a nice blend of ground textures. And while this was all still wet, I used a tyre to create some imprints which you might find in a well-used farm path. I managed to find some civilian figures with a decent amount of detail. Now, not as easy as you might think, but these post-war figures had some peace hand gestures which worked out perfectly for my needs. They were on a 1:35mm scale, which is a bit larger than I was used to working on, but once put together, they allowed me a good reference of scale for all the other elements in this build. I had some balsa wood lengths that were approximately the right size for fence posts, so I made some small holes and glued these into place. Then with some coffee sticks I glued these into place for the horizontal parts of the fence. This was a little fiddly, but with some patience, a fence started to emerge. I made a farm gate in a similar way, using another coffee stick for the diagonal cross brace. I made some hinges for my gate using very fine wire wrapped around some tweezers to form a small circle, and left a little tag end of wire that I could then fix into the gate. Then with some small corresponding L-shaped bits of wire attached to the other fence post, I was able to drop my gate into place, and to my surprise, I had a functioning farm gate. Then using a small strip of styrene, I made a latch for the gate. Now this didn't actually need to work, but it adds a nice little detail to the gate. And then it was onto my crop field. For this, I wanted to try and recreate the kind of mechanically ploughed field that one may associate with a farm. I spread some PVA and then used some garden soil, which was different in texture to the fine dirt I'd used earlier. This would represent the nutrient-rich, well-composted soil used to grow crops. I used a straight edge to define the plough lines a little. And then fixed this all into place with some very dilute PVA. I sprayed everything with some isopropyl alcohol first, as this allows the dilute PVA mix to sink into the soil much easier. While this was drying, I began to work on my UFO. I went for the typical flying saucer shape and thought 2 plastic plates would give me a rough shape I was after. I'd also ordered some EL wire, often used to decorate the interior of cars, as I'd always wanted to try it out and thought this would be a perfect opportunity to do so. Next, I grabbed some safety glasses and started to work on some of the details of my UFO. A juice bottle cap had some nice details, and with a milling bit, thank you to the viewer who gave me the correct name for this attachment, I carved out the centre of the bottle cap. Then with another container lid, also with a hole cut out, I pushed everything together and then fixed everything into place with some hot glue. Now, some plastics are easier to work with than others. I'm no expert, but I'm guessing that some chemicals just don't react well with glue. But I found that if you rough the area up that you want to glue together with some sandpaper, it gives the glue a much better surface to stick to. Now my flying saucer was starting to take shape. I thought it would be a good idea to attach the EL wire around the rim. Now, in hindsight, I should have primed the plates first and then attached the wire, but in the heat of the moment, this simple step evaded me. I grabbed another bottle cap, from some floor cleaner I think, as this was about the right size to slot into my other bottle caps. I drilled some holes into this and then pushed some styrene tubes through the cap, which would help me focus light into a singular point. And to provide that light, I grabbed some ultra bright LEDs from a previous project, which dropped into these styrene tubes perfectly. As my ideas grew and grew, I thought it would be cool to add some more LEDs. After all, aliens are very technologically advanced. So I drilled some holes and dropped in some little blue LEDs. The wiring for all this can be a little bit confusing, but actually when you break it down, it's pretty straightforward. All the negative wires were connected directly to the negative terminal of a 3-volt battery holder, and the positive wires were wired to a switch and then to a positive terminal on the battery. Once everything was soldered together, I was thankful that everything switched on and worked as expected. I had to come up with a way to hide all this wiring and have access to the battery and switch, and I thought about using some magnets in some way, but sometimes the solution to a problem is a really simple answer. I cut the threaded part of the container, knowing that I could use the corresponding lid easily to access the internals. A bit of light sanding and some glue, and my solution was ready to fix into place. All of this was nicely finished off with a milk bottle top. I gave the fence a quick coat of brown with some acrylic paint. And then I had to find a solution for my crops. I thought about corn or something similar, but I knew I would need a lot of it for it to be believable. In the end, I settled on using this fake plastic plant, as it would allow me to easily reproduce similar sized plants without too much fuss. Usually I would use a rattle can for this, but as I'd already attached the EL wire and didn't want to mask it up, I decided to use a brush to apply the primer. A few good coats of this did the job nicely. Next, I needed to add some grass. I treated myself to a new static grass applicator from Warworld Scenics, which came with a whole bunch of static grass in a variety of lengths and colours. My advice on this topic is don't waste your money on cheaper ones, as they just really don't work. I have 3 of these now and wish I would have just bought a good one from the start. Working in small sections at a time, I added some basing glue and laid down a layer of 2mm spring grass. Pushed this around a little to create some high points while it was wet, and then began to build up the grass using some layering spray to fix this into place. Over the top of this, I began to build up the grass using different lengths and colours to give me a varied and more natural looking appearance. Repeating the steps with the layering spray until I was happy. While all this was drying, I added some simple weathering to the fence using a thin grey wash applied unevenly to give a bit of variation of colour. I added some grey spray paint to my flying saucer, again to give it a bit of colour variation. And then it was time for my alien. I'd looked online for some miniatures that I could order, but didn't really find anything that I liked, so like a crazy person, I decided I would try to make my own. Mark 1 was a failure. My second attempt, using green stuff, worked out much better. I primed everything and then used some black ink sprayed from below to quickly create some shadows. And then some white ink sprayed from above to create a nice zenithal highlight. I still had some plants left over from my jungle temple build, where Diorama Precipice kindly supplied me with some products, and found that some of these worked really nicely as some little shrubs and bushes. Link above if you want to watch that video. Again, Fabio, I can't thank you enough for the care package, and go and check them out for a vast selection of high quality plants. Links in the description below. I also had some leaf foliage in my stock of materials and thought this would be a great way to create some more bushes. I gave some sea foam a little coat of brown and then a quick coat of spray adhesive onto which I sprinkled some of the leaf foliage. Simple, but very effective in my opinion. These bushes were then carefully added to the scene. I felt that everything was still a little too clean looking, so I added a little layering glue and sprinkled some leaf debris, a little dirt, and some broken bits of sea foam, and this all helped tie everything together. A couple of coats of black around the rim of the base neatens everything up. And then all that was left was to add the figures to my scene, and that about wraps it up. I've really enjoyed this build as it has allowed me to experiment with a whole bunch of different techniques, sculpt my first miniature from scratch and play around with some LEDs. If you like this kind of video, give it a like. You can stay up to date with all the latest videos by subscribing, and you can support the channel by sharing it with your friends who might find it interesting. I have an Instagram you can follow, details below if you'd like to see some behind the scenes and works in progress. And thank you all for the amazing support and taking the time to watch. See you in the next video, and enjoy.